All right, Coach. Hey, thanks for joining me today on this Simple Coach to Coach interview. This is the hopefully not the last, but one of the ones that I have scheduled that caused me deep pain and anxiety. I first started with these guys a couple weeks ago. Oh, and I had to get a hat because I was like so impressed with what they have going on at John Carroll. I then proceeded to these guys, which not only did I have to do an interview, which was hard, I had to visit their campus to pick up a hat. And then I also stopped by these guys on the way to Marietta, to check out Muskingum. And I've lost friends over this already. So I'm just going to return back to my roots, if that's okay, and just be totally comfortable in who I am. So anyhow, thanks for joining me today. Really do appreciate it.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.
So, all right, you've been a head coach at Ohio Northern since 2019. And yeah, I think you were an assistant for 6-7 years. I don't know if I have the timing right there, but maybe you could just start by just talking about your soccer experience, how you ended up at John Carroll as the head coach.
At Ohio Northern, you mean?
Ohio Northern. Oh my gosh. See, I'm all confused now.
That's okay. Yeah, you're wearing a Mount Union hat. You are confused for sure. Yeah. Actually, before I get going, my wife actually attended Mount Union, so
see,
in our family, but she's an
Ohio. You know, right? Like, yeah.
Yeah. Great. So yeah, my journey at Ohio Northern, it was I had a fantastic career. Was honored to be recruited as a polar bear. And I had a high school teammate of mine that actually attended Ohio Northern. He was a year older than me, and kind of opened my eyes to Division III. I think throughout the recruiting process, as I'm sure most are, pursuing D1, D2 schools, that D1 or bust mentality, I think I was kind of caught up in that as well. Certainly didn't have the athletic ability to make it to the Division I level, so had a great experience on campus at Ohio Northern and several other D3 schools. And just fell in love with the place. I felt, right at home. It was a brotherhood from day one, and I felt like, some of the guys that were current students there welcomed me with open arms, and I felt like I was a teammate already before even committing. So just felt like I was a part of the family, and had a great experience since then. I haven't left. I mean, this is home for me. So I've been at Ohio Northern now as a student and now as a coach for close to 13 years. So loved every second of it. Was fortunate enough right after I played in the national championship game my senior year, a coaching position opened up, and felt like the job wasn't done, so to speak, as a player. So wanted to continue the success of the program, and here I am today, and haven't looked back.
We'll talk about now. That just brings thought to my mind. We'll talk about the D1 or bust thing a little bit later, since that's really interesting to me. But let me ask you, from the days when you recruited to where you are now, do you think players have changed? Have they gotten better?
I do. I think the game itself has evolved over the years. I think with more attention on the men's national team, and certainly at the professional level in this country, the MLS has grown a lot, and I think it just kind of trickles down from there. But certainly I think players are more technical now. I think coaching is a lot better than it was 15, 20 years ago. Even at the college level, it's a lot better now. So I just think that it's evolved. The game continues to evolve. The days of kick and run soccer, the old school 4-4-2, the game has just evolved so much. And I think certainly when you start to have some younger coaches being influx in such a conference as the OAC, I think that the game itself is just, it's different. It's much different. There's a lot more possession-based. There's a lot more tactical mindfulness to the game. And certainly I think the players are smarter. They've been better suited to play at the college level. I think they're bigger, faster, stronger now than they ever were. So athletically, I think they've grown. tactically, I think they've just gotten smarter, and technically, they're so much better than they were even say 10 years ago. Even back when I played, I mean, we were a very good side. We were very technical. We worked on technical ability every single day, but the players that come in now are just so much better, more in tune with the game.
Yeah. Definitely the athleticism. I think it's been not a breeding ground, but I think better athletes have been gravitating to the game, whereas in the past they might not have. And then I didn't even think about this. Now I'm going to have to start asking another question down the road to other coaches. Is the quality of coaching definitely has improved? I mean, definitely has improved. I mean, I think we played. I don't know. I want to say it was Ashland. No, but they're aren't they Division 1, Division 2?
Division 2.
Division 2. No, maybe they were Division 3 at the time. I keep thinking it was Ashland, but anyhow, their head coach was the basketball coach, and he had not a lick of understanding about the game. But anyhow, that was just an example. So I mean, 6 years now. How long has it taken you, do you think, to shape the program in a way that you could say, like, yeah, this is my program now. Now I've sort of moved everything or changed whatever I need to change, and now I just sort of need to follow it through. How long did that take? Knowing that you sort of went from a good situation, right, in the national championship, and sort of go through that process.
Yeah, absolutely. It certainly is a process. I think it's ongoing. I mean, it adapts, it evolves all the time. I always start with, especially even in the recruiting process when I talk to young men and their families, is I don't view it as my program. I view it as our program. I think we have an equal role in growing the culture, continuing the success on and off the field. So I only have a small part in it. I really do believe that. I think, ultimately there are a lot of decisions that have to be made that affect the outcome of a game, or the affect the environment in training, or whether or not we kind of open the doors to a recruit and their family. I certainly think it's ongoing, and I think to make it my program, it seems kind of selfish to me. So I view it as our program. I think our assistant coaches and everyone in our support staff, administration, everybody has a share in the development and the success. And I think it's the same thing when an individual accepts an award. It's in many ways it's a team award because everybody plays a part in that. So I think it's ongoing. I mean, I certainly think there are things that have to change every single season. There are things that non-negotiables I think kind of stay the same. They're maintaining each year. But I mean the generations are different. I mean just communication levels are different among these young student athletes. Their regard for their academic success is continuing to grow, and so I think it adapts each year. But it's certainly a process, and it takes a long time. So I think it's ongoing.
Yeah, that's I like hearing that. Right, it's our program, not my program. I should probably maybe rephrase the question next time. So I got to ask you something. So I'm gonna give you the background because I actually been going back and forth with a gentleman this morning on email who he emailed me about and reminded me. So I interviewed the head coach at Messiah moons ago, and Messiah is Messiah, right? 11 national championships. I mean, an astounding level of success. And I've always asked, and since then I've sort of wondered, if Messiah could do it, why couldn't, knowing that it's not easy, why couldn't others do it? And I look at you guys, and I see your level of success, conference, NCAAs, and I ask myself, why Ohio Northern? All due respect to Ohio Northern, I remember traveling there and playing there. Like you're in the middle of nowhere, right? Like Ada, Ohio is surrounded by cornfields, and I love the place. It's beautiful. Don't get me wrong, but what is it about Ohio Northern that you think that sort of attracted the right type of student athletes to make your program arguably one of the top programs in at least the Ohio Athletic Conference, right? And regionally, I think you guys are up there as well, but definitely in the Ohio Athletic Conference.
Yeah, I think honestly the seclusion is something that we really like and we take a lot of pride in. I think that always is the knock at Ohio Northern. You guys are surrounded by cornfields, but we still maintain a certain level of success academically. I think our standards of excellence are extremely high, and students that are attracted to the high pedigree of some of our programs. You look at a program like pharmacy or engineering, and to block out some of the distractions of being in a major city where there's a metropolitan area and there's a lot of people and there's a lot of things that you can get caught up in and social groups that you can get involved in. I think the fact that we are surrounded by cornfields allows us to focus on what we need to do. And so I think that's very attractive to students and their families as well, as they're coming here to get the job done in the classroom and on the field, obviously. So we have a lot of success because I think we just take a lot of pride in the fact that we are in a small town and everybody. It's a very, very family-oriented environment. You know all your professors know who you are. Everyone that you walk down the hall in the dorms, you know who they are, and they know who you are. So it's very close-knit, but I think the seclusion gives way to a lot of success. And obviously, we've had the Team Academic Award now for 14 consecutive years. So I think being surrounded by cornfields has honestly helped us.
Yeah. Huh. I will say, it's like you're driving down to Ohio Northern, that's my memory. I haven't been out there in years, obviously, but it was always, a beautiful campus in its own right. And I didn't mean that as a knock in the middle of cornfields. It always just struck me. You guys are like, what? I was telling the John Carroll coach, I was saying, I could get John Carroll, right? Cleveland, Urban, I can conceptually get it. It pains me to say that, but then you guys are just sort of out.
Yeah, I think the other part to that, too, is college is about having a good experience, attending university. You're trying to get a well-rounded experience. And in many ways, young men and women, they want to get away from their families a little bit. They want to kind of get out of town and see something new and meet new people. We're not too far away from all the major cities. We're about 2 hours away from Detroit, 2 hours away from Cleveland, hour and a half from Columbus. So in terms of Midwest, we're kind of centrally located. So we're able to attract some really good student athletes. And that you look at the majority of our roster, and they're all made up of guys that come from big cities. So I think to get away from it all and focus on their grades and focus on winning games and having the time of their life, I think is it's actually nice. It's really nice being secluded in the speak.
I will say educationally, you can't knock. There's as much as I'd want to. You can't knock Ohio Northern. Even back when I was at Mount Union, it was Ohio Northern was known academically, and then I think you have a law school among other things, right? It is definitely a unique educational institution in comparison to other Division III schools, I'll just say. Like I said, I wasn't knocking. It's just I'm trying to figure that out, right? If Messiah can do it, why can't you just sort of bottle that up and take it somewhere else? And then I'm looking around, I'm like, they have, right? I look at you guys have sort of bottled up something, and again, attract these players who, the few games I was able to watch this fall from Ohio Northern, I keep thinking there's your left wing maybe, and a couple of your midfielders where I was like, these guys are ball players, and it's like, why not Mount Union? Anyhow, all right, we'll move on. All right, I do have to ask about the Ohio Athletic Conference because it's a big football conference, and there's in fairness, OAC has a lot of great athletics, right? Marietta, right? The basketball and baseball. And I was wondering, does that level, and you guys' athletic program is outstanding as well in other sports. Does that hurt you guys just to have this, these other sports that do just as well. Do you think that helps you recruit these guys and say, hey, we can be like them? Like, we top tier athletic programs. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I certainly think it all kind of blends together. Athletics in general at the college level just continues to grow and mature, and so I think there is even a level of attention, such as you mentioned Mount Union football. Everybody knows of Mount Union football, and so all of a sudden the OAC becomes on the radar. But then the more research that's done from the recruits and their families, and even coaches that are gravitating towards this conference, I think it just continues to grow. I think that it just makes it that much more competitive, which is what makes it so enjoyable and fun to coach in this conference. When you have younger coaches that also feel that same way and that same wave of energy about, hey, John Carroll just won the All Sports Trophy, and so everyone in our department is thinking about that, putting that at the forefront of trying to pull that from John Carroll. I think our women just won the All Sports Trophy at Ohio Northern, so I think it's just that pedigree of competition that just makes it all the better and more enjoyable. But yeah, I certainly think it all helps. When we talk to recruits and families, it's I saw BW has success and in certain sports, and Marietta has certain success in sports, and I think all together we're all doing this in the same light. We're all in this together, kind of thing, and it just makes it that much more enjoyable.
Yeah. So maybe just from a soccer standpoint, could you just touch on the OAC? You guys are. I was reminded of this in the fall where I hadn't, and I should have been paying more attention of how competitive the OAC is, and it doesn't get maybe the notoriety that some of the other obvious conferences, maybe because it's mostly, a lot of people just look on the East Coast, at least here, but, how difficult, how competitive is the OAC for you, and we'll talk about your schedule a little bit in a little bit, just because I'm impressed with how tough your schedule is, at least in 2022. But how, just the OAC alone, how difficult is it for you game in and game out?
Oh, it's extremely difficult, and I think it kind of goes back to my initial comment too about how the game has grown. Recruiting has taken off. You've got younger coaches that are ambitious, that just have a lot of energy about them, and they become addicted to recruiting, and so it just makes for a very exciting, unique environment where there is no such thing as a bad game. You can't take your foot off the throttle. It's just around every corner somebody's going to want to beat you, and I think probably a decade or so ago, when there were probably a top 2, maybe top 3 teams in the OAC. Now I think it's starting to be top 6, top 7. Even top 8, where it's just at any given day there could be an upset, so to speak, on paper. But really, around every corner, there's a good game, and I think it's starting to get the notoriety that it deserves. I certainly think that the conferences like the NESCAC and the UAA kind of take the cake in that talk, but the OAC is certainly starting to creep up there. With just the level of competition and the amount of teams that are getting recognized in the region. I think the NCAA polls are going to start to show more OAC teams nationally ranked. I think the committees are going to start to take notice of that if they haven't already. And so it's just become a much deeper conference. And I think, maybe jumping ahead a little bit here, talking about scheduling, but, you have to constantly schedule difficult games if you want to prepare for the OAC. Again, maybe 10, 15 years ago, that wasn't the case, where the conference was a little bit easier to win games, and the pedigree has changed so much. So now you almost have to schedule difficult games if you want to match the competitiveness of the conference. So you can't take anyone for granted. Everybody wants to win, and again, it makes it that much more enjoyable.
So are your let's go there. When you build your schedule now, is it intentional that you pack on some hefty teams? Ohio Wesleyan, Carnegie Mellon, Kenyon, I saw this year, Hanover. Just you purposely make it that tough for you?
It is intentional, and I do get asked that all the time. Like, what are you doing with your scheduling? Why are you scheduling those games? And go back to the comment about we want to operate at a high level. We want to continue to push the barrier, and I think if we want to be a top 10 contender, you're going to have to face teams like that. You're going to have to set yourself up for success that way by, hey, look, we do open with Kenyon. We do, last season we opened with a Calvin. We opened with a Hope. Yeah. You just have to test yourself all the time. And I think, too, with the nature of recruiting and the types of players that we bring in and the types of players that are in our conference now, they're used to playing at a high level. They're used to competing at the national stage or playing MLS Next or playing ECNL, and so they're just, I don't like to schedule easy games. I don't want to schedule a 9-0 game or an 8-0 game. I want to challenge us. I want our players to look at that and go, hey, we did play against a nationally ranked team, and we got to turn around and do it again. You have to do that to win a national championship. So why not test them early? Why not test them often? And so I think that's just kind of been our philosophy in scheduling. And if it helps us with strength of schedule, and if we don't end up winning the conference tournament, I think we can always look back at those and say, hey, those helped us. And I think that certainly helped us in 2019. We learned from that, and we want to continue to do that.
Yeah, the scheduling thing is interesting, right? Because you're trying to balance it. I always thought you'd try to balance it between, hey, let's get us through to the conference, but then you also have the strength of schedule depth, which I'm sure. But I look at your guys' schedule and I'm like, oh my gosh, there is not that you don't have a rest, but you don't have a respite from what you're playing, right? Like you play your 6-7 out of conference games, and then you roll right into Mount Union at Mount Union, and that's never easy, right? Like you said, those games are just not easy. So, hey, let me ask you. You mentioned this earlier. Could you just talk a little bit about your leadership group that you have for your team? What's that made up of? What does that look like?
Yeah, I mean, we have several team leaders. We have what's called our leadership council. We meet periodically throughout the year. Discuss, topics of things on the field, things off the field, trying to develop and nurture these young men into being respectful leaders. And, they're going to have to, at some point in their careers, not just playing careers, but their careers in life, they're going to lead. And we've kind of allowed them to step up and provide a voice for the team and for their class as a gap between player and coach. There's a lot of information that gets sent down to us as coaches, and we feel it's necessary to share a lot of that information, if not all of it, with our team leaders, because they're the guys that are living it. We're quite blessed as coaches, especially at Ohio Northern, where we have really upstanding, successful people, some first-class citizens that they're really good in the classroom, and they garner a lot of achievement, a lot of awards over the course of the year. So we put it on their shoulders to lead the rest of the team and lead the rest of the group. So our leadership council is huge for us. Sometimes we read a book, we discuss podcasts, we discuss different current events that are happening, diversity, inclusion, gender equality. We talk about mental health and taking a break every now and again, and there's a lot of topics and there's a lot of information out there, and again, these are the guys that are living it, so why not discuss it openly? I think that creates a really unique bond, creates a lot of trust, and it helps our team culture. It really does.
How is it? I'm assuming it's the team captains, and then do you have a representative per class? Is that?
Yeah, so we lean on, our players have some input on who they think the leaders of their class are. So, if we bring in a class of, let's say, 10 or 12, there might be one or two guys from that class that we feel like could be potential captains, but they just have a little bit more of a unique voice about them than the rest of the group. So we want to tap into that because we want to make sure that they're kind of following the path of what our former captains and leaders have done, and kind of hand the torch off, so to speak. But they are the spokespeople for their class, and they're the go-to guy that if something does come up in a particular class or something needs sorted out and decisions need to be made, we have a kind of an equal role in each class where we can turn to them and make decisions. Again, it's not my team, it's our team, so we share it.
I'm starting to think, I used to think like it was, hey, the coach creates this structure, culture, team, environment, what their program looks like, and then obviously the players run with it. But now I'm starting to think the importance of the leadership council, like in your case, of being those guys who carry the torch for the team. And it's not just the coach carrying the torch, it's that council that's spreading the word to all of the other guys. But I still haven't fleshed that out in my own head. Let me ask, especially since 2019, you became the head coach. Like, how tough was COVID or how much fun was COVID for you guys? For your program, for your players, for you as a coach.
Yeah, it was particularly challenging just in the fact that it stretched everything out to an entire year. An entire academic year became soccer nonstop, right? And trying to find the times when to rest, when to take a look at mental health, and realizing what was all placed on these young student athletes. It was incredibly challenging. I think, in the very least, it's always challenging as a coach, right? I mean, it's a 12-month commitment.
Yeah.
We're working nonstop, and the daily grind of recruiting and fundraising and development and structuring and programming. It's a lot. So to do that for an entire year was challenging, but I can't imagine what it would be like as a student athlete. And I think Leadership Council was huge in that, because we were able to keep a finger on the pulse of, hey, what's going on? Like, how's everybody feeling? And so, the fact that the season got postponed to the spring was really, it was an entirely new thing. Nobody had ever gone through that, and so we kind of went through it together. So there were a lot of enjoyable moments. There were a lot of moments where, we kind of we had to take a sigh of relief when some things were done and over with, splitting into groups with all the COVID restrictions that the conference and the NCAA kind of imposed. And it was more just, can we follow the rules? Can we keep everybody healthy and happy? We were pretty fortunate that during the fall and during the spring of the COVID year, nobody contracted the virus, which was astonishing. I think our university did a fantastic job. I think our administration did a really good job of communicating. Our athletic training staff stepped up big time and did an awful lot that was asked of them when they probably didn't know what to do in that moment. So, there were a lot of challenges around every corner. I think we dealt with it really well. And I think the student athletes had to overcome a lot. And I can't imagine what they were going through on a daily and weekly basis.
Were you guys on campus the whole time, or were the players sent, or the students sent home for that when it first came about, that March?
When it first came about in 2020, during the spring, we were asked to leave campus as a precaution, and that was a unique moment that no one really knew kind of what to expect, what could happen, and but I think heading into the fall semester of that year, without even knowing what was going to happen to our season, I think just being back on campus was a breath of fresh air, and everybody was able to return back to some normalcy. I think our administration knocked it out of the park and did a really phenomenal job. We were kind of, if I may say, one of the leaders in our conference in making decisions, maybe at the forefront, when I think our president did a good job and was a leader, and everybody kind of followed suit. So it was a really interesting time, but I think looking back, I'm proud to say that we were able to return back to campus, and despite our season being pushed to the spring, we still were able to train. We were able to practice in some capacity. We were able to compete against each other, and we almost just flip-flopped, right? Our non-traditional segment became the fall, and the fall became the spring, and we made the most of it. And it was an interesting time. I'm fortunate enough to have, enjoyed that time and shared that time with my colleagues and everybody else in the conference. We all looked around and were like, thank goodness that was over. And I don't know if I feel that exactly. I was fortunate enough to continue to coach and do my job and recruit. I think recruiting was pivotal during that time. We were still able to land a lot of our top guys, and our staff did a phenomenal job. I'm very pleased with the work that we did. But I'm just pleased to have lived through it, right? I mean, everybody I think at some point said that. Like, I'm still alive, I'm still breathing, still kicking. COVID for everybody was affected by it for sure.
You were NCAA, how did you, from a soccer perspective, all the training you did, like, and not knowing when you would get to play, what did you find that time period valuable other than getting together to play? I mentioned Coach Bergen earlier at Marietta, and he said he really took advantage of the situation in that he was able to work on things that that you wouldn't during a regular season. You wouldn't necessarily have that amount of time. Is that similar for you guys?
Sure.
Or?
Yeah, absolutely. I think any time that we're able to spend with these student athletes is valuable, whether it's in a classroom setting or on the field, in the locker room, training, our environment. I think it's always awesome to get to know these guys as people and mentoring them. But yeah, I mean, anytime you get to train and better yourself it has to be valuable. I think that's why we do this, right? And certainly during the non-traditional segment, there's always times where you can work on things that are a little bit more curtailed to the individual improvement or small group environment, such as a back four, such as a midfield three, a front three, or a front five unit, whichever system that you go to, where you're not preparing for game and you're not putting away a game and you're not watching film on an opponent, you're not doing a scouting report. So yeah, during that fall, I think there were certainly some things that we saw a lot of improvement from our guys that we were able to train from, I think it was like sometime in September up until November we were training. There was a lot of growth that happened during that time from especially the younger, the first years and sophomores and guys that still had some time to develop, of course. Absolutely.
All right, so I have to ask you this one because you raised. I wasn't going to ask, but you brought it up. The D1 or bust that you experienced. That you mentioned you experienced. Excuse me. What are your thoughts on that now that you're the head coach and you're probably seeing it firsthand of players that think that they have to do D. I don't want to say have to do D1, but they feel compelled that that's the thing that they have to do.
Yeah, I think it all goes back to some of my initial comments too about how coaching has developed and changed over the years, and I think at the club level, these young athletes are being coached not just on the field; they're being coached on next level mentality of what it's going to take to get to that next level. But I think a lot more coaches, especially some of the more younger ones that have played and have playing experience at the college level, are starting to open the eyes of families and these athletes of it's not all the grass isn't always greener on the other side. Yeah. I think that's evolved a ton, especially even from when I played, where it was like if you didn't make it to D1, you were considered less of an athlete. Whereas now I think it's starting to level out. I think when you take a look at the scholarship levels that are available at the Division I, Division II, and Division III level, when there are none, it's pretty minimal, right? The gaps between, and so there's a lot of myth busting that goes on when you talk to families, when you talk to recruits, that Division I doesn't even they can't even field a full 11, a full scholarship. So those conversations have to happen still. I just think it's happening less and less. But the types of players that we, have conversations with and talk to that are looking at, a couple of smaller schools and then they throw in a D1 or they throw in a couple D1 schools, that conversation has to come up. But we always start with academics. Academics is always first and foremost. So no matter what school you're looking at, you could be one injury away from never playing the game again. So you're trying to create a foundation for what you want to do in life. So few and far between are these athletes going on to play in the MLS or going to play professionally. So they have to take a look at it from a career standpoint. What are they going to get out of their academic career in their time in college? Is that going to prepare them for life? And that's what we're all about, really. That's what we're here to do as stewards of the university, to say, is Ohio Northern setting you up for life? That's what we're here to do. Soccer is a secondary thing to that. Obviously, we want to do as well as we can on the field and have a lot of success. But D1 or bust, from the time when I was going through it to now, there's so much resource. I mean, there's so many resources out there. There's recruiting services, there's scouting services. I think the D1 model is obviously strong. It's hard to compete with that, but when there's so many international students that make up rosters, when there's a lot of scholarship money in the conversation, those conversations with recruits have to happen where, are you getting an offer? Are you getting a scholarship? But I guess what I want to say the most is you got to look at the transfer rate. Look at all of the D1 transfers that have been on the portal. Those conversations have to happen with these families because it's not greener on the other side all the time, and it's unfortunate that you see and hear about players that had an amazing club and high school career and academy career, and then they go to D1 and they kind of fizzle out. They burn out, and there's a lot of transfer rate. So I think those numbers don't lie.
I don't think it's. I think COVID sort of jump-started that,
Sure.
but I do think players are starting to ask, like, what am I? I mean, I think there's a lot of realism with players nowadays to one degree or another. There's still some where you're like, yeah, you could wish all you want that you're going to be a national team player, but the reality is that you're not. But there's, I think there's a realism to the players like, maybe I just want to enjoy my college career playing and getting a good education. And I think that's opening up the doors. But I do think that there is that Division I is something that you have to go, gravitate towards.
Yeah, it's still prestigious. It's still an honor. I don't think that's ever going to go away because there's scholarship money up for grabs. So the fact that you can come that close to getting a scholarship when your parents and your family have paid all those fees for all the clubs over the years, and they've traveled across the country and they've attended all these sessions and they've gone to camps. It's an investment, right? They want the scholarship and they want to put it on their social media that they made it to D1, and they want to brag to their families and look at where I'm going. And it's unfortunate that is the narrative, but we have to open their eyes more, and we have to have more conversations. But I think coaching in general has grown and adapted, and it's changing. I mean, the environment is certainly changing.
Yeah. So I'll two things. I think there's this wrong impression that folks have about D1 that every school is like a Maryland or is like Santa Clara or is like, some of these big time schools, top 20 schools. And the reality is that no, once you start coming down the ladder a little bit, it's not all, it's not that way. And then, I forget what the second point was, but that's all right. But I do think that that's the case. Is that most folks think, oh, I'm being recruited by, Paul University, they're Division I. Oh, look at that, and they think Paul University is the greatest, like Maryland is, or again, sort of standards around here. And the truth of the matter is that that's neither the funding or the support level is necessarily there.
Absolutely.
Hey, I got to ask you something about the rules. The rule changes about overtime. What are your thoughts on that? And do you think, probably more importantly, do you think that the overtime changes are going to change the way you coach a game?
First thing I want to mention is, the fact that we as coaches are able to have a voice in making decisions that can span across all the divisions, and I think we're ultimately always going to try and mimic the professional level. We're trying to mimic the international stage. It's hard when you're coaching college student athletes. We are not professional athletes. We are not playing in the MLS at the Division III level. Pretty frequently, it's just not happening. So it's hard to make that comparison. But when we're making these rule changes, I think it's ultimately always going to impact the way that we coach. I was probably not so much in favor as much as some of my colleagues were with the overtime changes. I would I would want to keep it regular season and postseason the same. I think that's just an easier understanding from a student athlete standpoint. Is it's similar, right? Preparing for games is similar. Knowing the outcome at the end of regulation is similar. So now you have to coach differently in postseason. I understand all of the the logic behind it with injury prevention and trying to shorten the amount of time that we're putting and placing on these student athletes. I think it's an incredible amount. I think there's been a lot of movement, a lot of discussion about what happens in the postseason. We play back-to-back days where it's Friday, Saturday, NCAA tournament. You know, that's an awful lot. Final Four, playing in the semifinal to go and play in the final the next day. It's a lot, especially in warmer weather states and climates that these are taking place. Things have to continue to develop and change. I think it's good. I think it's positive. It's progressive. I would just have liked it to stay the same regular season and over the postseason.
Do you think like the last 15 minutes of a game you're going to be like, geez, it's 0-0. I'm either throwing caution to the wind to try and get a goal, or I'm going to defend like the Dickens for the next 15 minutes because there is no overtime?
I mean, honestly, in the flow of the game, I don't know if that much thought process is taking place. I think probably more on the sideline it might be, but I'm fortunate. I'm glad that the substitution rules didn't change, because I think I think that would be a step in the wrong direction when, especially in the Division III level, when we're talking about inclusion, we're talking about let's get as many student athletes involved, and the roster sizes are growing, right? So I'm glad that stayed the same. I think that would have drastically changed a lot of coaching decisions of what happens in the flow of the game. But I think ultimately, when you're in the driver's seat in a game and you've got all the possession and you're trying to, establish your game plan, I don't know that a whole lot changes in the last 10 to 15 minutes. I think you're still trying to go for a win. I think if you're on the defensive side of things, maybe you are trying to bunker in a little bit. Maybe you are trying to kill some clock. I mean, I think that happens. That's pretty natural. That's intelligent coaching. I don't know that the overtime thing changes that a lot. I think ultimately, if you're trying to go on and win that game, you're going to continue to maintain the same output of what you want.
So you mentioned earlier non-negotiables. Do you have team non-negotiables that you work with, or that you have in place?
Yeah, absolutely. I think first and foremost, we're always representing Ohio Northern University at all times, both on and off the field. Later on in life, you always have that across your chest and on your back. I mean, Ohio Northern is always with you, so you have to make sure that you're putting that at the forefront. So that's always the most important thing. I think establishing the fact that academics come first. I mean, we have our priorities in life. I think making sure that there's a balance of our priorities is important, but I think academics is always at the forefront. That's always the first thing. I think if we have an imbalance of soccer and academics in our social life, I think there's a lot of things that could go wrong. The non-negotiables for us is just classes come first, academics come first. That's why you're here. That's why you're a student. We're trying to create a platform for you to be successful in life, and academics is the reason why you're doing that. So soccer is a secondary thing. I think social life becomes a third, and I think if there's an imbalance of those things, then we have to have a conversation. But non-negotiables, I mean, that's pretty clear, cut and dry. We value a lot of communication, so I think a lot of times it's simple to keep in touch with somebody, text, email, social media. I mean, it's all around us, but I think it's equally as easy to let things fall through the cracks. So communication becomes a priority for us with our student athletes. We value it a ton with the recruits and their families, and we understand it pretty clearly. If a recruit and their families don't value communication, it's probably not going to work out for them as a student, because they're going to have professors that are reaching out to them. They're going to have their advisors and faculty, and there's a lot of things that are asked of them communication-wise. So that becomes that much more important, because communication is critical in life. Whether you have a family or you're a manager or a boss in some way, shape, or form, communication is always important. That never changes. And so we value that a ton, and we make sure that we're molding these young men to respect that. That communication is that important. And I think really the last thing that we really try and harp on a lot is that they enjoy the sport. In many ways, this is different than Division I, Division II, where it's pretty laid back from a coach's standpoint. Like, we don't have full control over the student athletes all the entire year. But ultimately, they have to enjoy it. They have to have a respect for the game. They have to have a respect for their opponent, the officials. but they're always showing up to practice. They're always showing up to a team meeting with, they have an expectation level, but they also have a level of enjoyment that it's not a job. It should never feel that way. And that they develop and retain a sense of pride in what they do. And that goes for everything that they do. That's not just within the sport. I think it's important to compete with a smile on your face. You're going to go to war against your enemy, your opponent. Sometimes that's the crowd. Sometimes you may feel like that's the official. But at the end of the day, we have to take a step back and say, that we have the best life to be able to compete at this level. And we're fortunate to be able to put our cleats on and put our shin pads on and go to war and play on the field. It's a blessing. Sometimes we lose sight of that and we think like it's just go, let's win. But we have to take a step back and say, hey, we're a Division III college student athlete. This is an amazing life. You're going to have fond memories. You're going to have the time of your life. You're going to be able to see the world and travel all across the country and play and compete. And so we always try and make sure that they have a smile on their face. They play competitive, fun games. They're going to compete against each other in practice, and the environment suits them. But there's a certain level of respect and enjoyment that our guys have, and honestly, it's a blessing for us as coaches. We don't have any things that way.
A lot easier to coach someone who's into the game and finds joy just in the game and whatever they do around it, right? Like that's Absolutely. I think that's just about in anything in life. But hey, since we talked a little bit about the calendar crunch and sort of been trying to do things to sort of ease it up a little bit, do you from a coaching perspective, how do you during the regular season do you prepare for teams? It's not a lot. You have like 2 days, right? So I'm just, to what level of detail do you go into sort of game analysis, opponent analysis, and then how much of that do you convey over to your team in the practices leading up to the game?
Yeah, the easiest way for me to summarize that is, us as coaches, we can only control so much. We can manage certain situations in the game. We can make substitutions. We can tweak things with tactics. But once the whistle blows, there's a lot that is on the shoulders of our players, and so we try and make it as simplistic as possible. We don't want to overwhelm them with too many details and have them make too many decisions. I think they're already up against it with the decisions they have to make on a daily basis. Maintaining a GPA and turning in all their assignments and labs and projects and things that they're working on. We have to take a step back as coaches and go, hey, we don't want to flood their minds with too much that might overwhelm them come kickoff. So we want to lay out some things that help us prepare for our opponent. We do watch a ton of film as a coaching staff. We do want to convey a lot of that to our players, but it's certainly not overwhelming. We try and structure it in a way that they can take the 4 or 5 clips of their strengths and 4 or 5 clips of their weaknesses and try and replicate that in training, so they know, okay, the day before a game, we hope that we can replicate this so that when they step on the field, it's that much easier. But we don't want to spend an awful lot. We don't want to spend 2 days preparing for an opponent. We also have to look at ourselves and go, hey, this is what we're good at, so this is what we want to go with. This is the wave that we want to ride. And there's an ebb and a flow to the season. Sometimes you have injury setbacks. Sometimes you have climate changes that happen on the fly, and you have to adapt. You have to evolve. You have to change your game a little bit. You have to change your system. I think it's really easy when you have some student athletes like us that we have, where they're incredibly intelligent, a high soccer IQ. They're very analytical. They're very visual learners. They want to see things firsthand. They want that assurance that what the coaches are presenting to them it's concrete, it's real, it's tangible. But at the same time, we want to make it as simple as we can. We don't want to overwhelm them and have just constant reminders. It's really, we rely on their soccer IQ a lot. As coaches, we're not screaming from the sideline. Half the time they can't even hear us. They're so focused and in with the game. And I think some coaches that do yell on the sideline a lot, especially the youth and coach.
My gosh! Don't get me started. I'm just telling you right now. Rabbit hole.
Yep, absolutely. So we try and keep it as simple as we can. These are model student athletes that they've got a lot on their shoulders already. So we do want to curtail it to us a lot of times, but we also have to look at our opponents throw at us some interesting details, and we have to make sure that they understand those things.
Yeah. If you had a week to prepare, I would say, you know what, you can maybe do more, but I just don't know how good it is for. I don't think under the time constraints players adjust well enough to being told, barraged with information, right? And then go out there and do something, and it just causes confusion, right? And they got to remember what they do, and I just think sometimes that ends up being too much. So with all that went on, like, what were your expectations for the year, coming into the year, aside from the fact you're like, yeah, we get to play a regular season again? Like, what sort of expectations did you have going into it?
Yeah, I think a lot of what built up into the 2021 season was we had a short turnaround time from competing in the spring. We had a summer where typically when you tell your guys, like, hey, you got to keep your foot on the ball, you got to stay active, you got to do all the things that are going to help you prepare for the fall. But normally that's in the light of, well, we just came off of the spring season, we just came off of a time when we were individually growing, we were developing in small groups, small settings. But now we are expecting them to, okay, you got to be fit in another month. Like we're done with the season, now you got to get ready again. So that was always ultimately going to be a challenge. And the short turnaround time, I think, at the end of the day, spiked up some of our injuries a little bit more than we were expecting. But I think we also had to, an influx of young talent that we brought in. There was a learning process with that because the year before we had the fall season to grow accustomed to one another and embrace one another. Whereas the fall of 2021, we had a short turnaround time and we had to welcome an incoming class. We had to do it in 3-4 days of preseason. So the expectation level, I think, was always going to be the same. We want to win the conference. That never goes away. I think competing at the national stage and being nationally ranked is always important. We always shoot for that. Winning the conference is ultimately important to us. So, but we also wanted to throw in some games that were challenging, right? We kind of talked about that earlier and creating a good strength of schedule. We knew that going in, we didn't have that experience from the spring or from the previous fall because it was conference only. So kind of teaching and bringing that back into light to say, hey guys, like we're starting with Calvin, like they're number 3 in the country. We need to prepare for that.
Tough team.
Sure, and the incoming class. Oh wow, okay. We start with a nationally ranked team. Like there was a certain learning curve that had to happen in a quick state, and so we knew that was going to dictate what happened the rest of the year. So, I think it's just reminding everyone that season we were finally able to compete. We finally had some thought of NCAA tournament on the horizon, but also there was the challenge of, okay, COVID-19 hasn't really gone away. We're still kind of in the middle of a pandemic. There are still people out there that were unvaccinated, so we knew that there was still a risk at play, and our games could get shut down at any moment. So there was still some of that lingering, but nonetheless, we still wanted to compete, have fun, enjoy it. That was the most important thing, is that we were just able to enjoy a full year again. And again, we maybe didn't talk about it enough, but we had a lot more smiles on our faces because it was just a little bit more at ease, which was nice.
I asked that. I always ask that question just because I forgot. Like I've mentioned this before. Like I've last 5, 6, 7 years, this has been my office. Like I leave to go visit clients, but this is where I work. So to me, COVID wasn't a big deal, and I forget how big of a deal it was going into the fall. Like no one kind of knew, I could be canceled tomorrow. I know Connecticut College, I think they went a week where they had to stop training in the middle of their preseason because of COVID. And I forget that was still very much hanging over everybody. And you as a coach, right? Like, or the coaching staff's having to deal with that sort of thing. I mean, it just doesn't make it easy. It's a difficult thing in the first place, and then you're compounding that. So you made it to the quarterfinals of the OAC. I recall to have watched that game, and I go back and forth in terms of whether I thought it was the right score or not, but and you lost to a very, very good Otterbein team. I thought 1-0. What was your take on that game? And then just in hindsight, what was the take on your season after it was all done?
Yeah, I think heading into that game, it was actually the semifinal where we played.
Semifinals. I'm sorry.
Yeah, so we advanced from.
Jeez, I'm screwing it all up today, huh?
Okay. We had faced a good team in Marietta in the quarterfinal at home. Fortunate enough to host that round. Played exceptionally well. We were in really, really good form. We were on like a 4 or 5 game win streak, I think, at the time. So I think we were kind of buzzing to get into the semifinal and advance. And again, the expectation, we want to win the conference. So that was the dominating feeling, was that we made it to the semifinal, but that's not where we wanted to settle. So I think it was, premature ending for us. We felt like there were spells at the later stage of the season where we felt really good about ourselves. We were in a really good place mentally. I think physically we were in a good place. We had some structure. We finally had some good form. And I think we were just excited and enjoying it again. I think heading into the semifinal, I think we were a little disappointed to not put one in the back of the net. We had some good chances. I think we hit the crossbar in the first half.
Yep.
It was pretty neck and neck. I think there were some periods where, we were playing a team that was pretty much undefeated all year round. So and we had tied them in the regular season 1-1, and I believe it was 1-1. So we knew it was going to be a good game. We knew it was going to be a good matchup. We were at their place. We were kind of up against it wise. Possession at some point. I wasn't pleased to get shut out, but it was a good Otterbein team, and they were good at what they did. They had a different approach to the game from their previous season, and it obviously worked. They had reached the final last season, so I think how the outlook of the season went, I think there's always a wave in the season where you kind of go through some spells, some tough times, some results that don't go your way, some injury setbacks and things like that. So heading into that game, we kind of weren't thinking about that. We were just kind of riding the fact that we were in really good form and we had some guys in the right positions and things were clicking, things were working. So I think it was just kind of disappointment that the season had ended at that point. Mm-hmm. We had a really good strength of schedule, but some of the results didn't go our way. We needed to win that game. It was very much a must win, and so we were disappointed for sure.
I think the one that you're talking about, that one that went off the crossbar in the first half, that goes in. It's a different game.
Absolutely, yeah. I think that
the timing of that couldn't have been better for you all. Like that becomes a different game, and it doesn't end 1-0 their side. I just think that to me is like that moment, right? Like if you can capture that moment, you own the game, and then it's beyond. So
yeah, and I never want to discredit an approach.
No, yeah.
Like Otterbein or like any of our opponents. I think that's just the nature of reality, and that's the way you have to prepare. And they're a very restart-heavy team, and they've got an incredible restart approach. They've got some bodies in there that can fight for the ball, and they've got a long throw that was effective. And at the end of the day, that's what ended up getting us. So it was kind of disappointing in the fact that throughout the run of play, there weren't many chances either way, but at the end of the day, sometimes that's what it takes to go on in the NCAA tournament, is to get some goals that way, and it was effective for them, obviously. So we were kind of disappointed in the fact that we did only give up one goal that way, and we had good looks ourselves.
Yeah, it is true in hindsight. Now that I think about it, I think they had a couple chances in the run of play, but you're right. It was the tactic was, how do we get a set play, whether that's be it a throw in a corner or ball outside the box from a foul. That was like where you could just tell, like they amped up, right? Like they knew that was their opportunity. Whereas I think you guys definitely tried to play and get the ball forward and try to create things in front of their goal, but I think defensively they ended up doing really well down that the middle portions of the field that made it really difficult. But
yeah, they certainly have some talent, and I think they've got a lot of talent returning. So, their coach does a phenomenal job. Jason does a really good job, and it's at all times too. It's learning moments. I think we in the regular season arguably had some better looks. We did put them in the back of the net, and that could have been a totally different story heading into the semifinal. Looking back at some of those strengths, we felt like at the end of that game in the regular season, we felt like we were the better team. So we were devastated at that result, and then to turn around and then not get one in the back of the net and give up one on a set piece, I think was disappointing for sure.
Yeah, I do think I'd love to figure out a way. I don't know how to do it. Is watching games and there's so many games where the side that ends up on the wrong side of the scoreboard missed out on the opportunity to turn the game their way, and I'd love to figure out a way to how to capture that and sort of explain it, because there are those moments, right? And if more times than not you don't capitalize on them, you end up on you can't show all your work, right? Like it's a cruel game that way. But so what do you think you learned the most about your team this season?
Yeah, from this past fall, we had a lot. It was an interesting dynamic because we had some returning upperclassmen that had a lot of experience, but then we also had an influx of young players that also had a lot of talent. So it was pretty split down the middle in terms of upperclassmen and underclassmen. So it was how quickly could we embrace one another, and how quickly could we all fight towards what our goals were. There were a lot of challenges along the way. I think one of the main things that I learned as a coach, as a young coach, was how hard we're pushing them on a weekly basis, and the amount of injuries that we surpassed and our athletic training staff had to go through, particularly because we did go from a quick turnaround from the spring, not a whole lot of recuperating time, into the fall again, and having a lot of upperclassmen where they're just battered, they're war-torn. That's pretty natural. So I think that was something that I certainly learned was we gotta track that a little bit better. We have to manage it a little bit better, and that was a learning moment for me and our staff. But at the end of the day, we always know that we're going to be operating at a high level. So I think that, and expecting our culture to carry us forward, moving forward, I think it's always so important. The fact that our guys had to go through roughly almost 2 years of some sort of impact from COVID.
Yeah.
That trying to put that away, but also making sure that they were aware that it was one game at a time. We didn't know what our opponents were going to do. Were games going to be played? Were they not going to be played? Were we going to have an NCAA tournament? So there were still a lot of question marks out there. So I think it was more just, hey, let's focus on our culture. Let's focus on ourselves. Take it game by game. Let's enjoy every moment of it. And I think I'll remember that most, especially about our seniors, is that they gave it everything, and forever grateful for what they had to go through. Because it was pretty easy for a lot of our upperclassmen over the years to say, hey, I'm not going to play because we don't have an NCAA tournament. Like, we don't have a full season. I don't want to get my season shut down because of COVID, so I'm going to step away. So the fact that our guys gutted it out for 4 years that's incredibly tremendous.
Yeah.
Personalities about them, and first class mentality.
Yeah. That is a remarkable 2 years, right? Like, where they...
Yeah.
And I constantly, I have to remind myself that, like, watching the games, like, it's 2 years these guys have been dealing with something that, no one, you got to go back 100 years for people to deal with something remotely similar. All right, so before we shift over to recruiting, I do have to say, if whoever's watching and wants to watch high quality soccer, Ohio Northern soccer, has to check out the beginning of your season, where you go to Kenyon at Kenyon, you go to you play North Park at home, which I'm a big fan of North Park. I love their Swedes. I think they're Swedes, but they're midfielder and forward. They are just fantastic ball players. You host Ohio Northern, Then you go to Hanover to play Hanover. You play Carnegie Mellon, you play Trine, and then you open up at Mount Union, at Larry, or the Cara Stadium now that it's called. So if you want an example of really good Division III soccer as played by Ohio Northern and then these other teams, I think that's probably the best stretch of a schedule that I've seen. So with that, if we could, let's I want to ask one other thing that just popped into my head that I just realized when I was talking to Coach Bergen at Marietta. You are one of 3 schools in the OAC with your own field. You're not playing on a football stadium. You have your own field. And I remember actually when we played on, it was grass when we played up there. Do you think that matters to you guys, that you have your own place to play versus playing in football stadiums, which most other folks do? Like, maybe from a recruiting standpoint, maybe it does, I don't know, but from a when people come and play against you, do you think that plays in your favor, the fact that you have your own place to play and that you're comfortable at home and all those things?
I certainly think it's valuable. It sticks out in the recruiting process, having a soccer-only field. I think it creates a certain level of comfort within our squad. I think we can't lose sight of the fact that we do have to travel on the road and play in football stadiums, and we have to play on grass fields. So the fact that we have the luxury of, we have 3 fields that are at our disposal. I mean, we can go and train on our football stadium if we wanted to. We could go and train on our grass field, and kind of get the guys ready for any type of element. I think is really nice. It's really flexible and it creates a level of comfort. Whereas if you don't have that accessible, you might be at ease, or you might be tense. Where I don't know how to prepare for this. What's the surface going to be like? So we can have this sense of, okay, let's just settle down, let's play our game, whether it's at home or away. I don't know if we really talk that much about it in terms of what our field does. I mean, we have a larger field than most in our conference, but I think it's just establishing, okay, what kind of advantages can we gain from this field? What are the disadvantages? And I think it's just walking through those because, again, there's certain things that change on the fly. There's obviously, wind is a huge factor.
Wind is big. I remember the wind up by you guys was ridiculous.
Yeah, I mean, we train in that every day, and so our guys kind of get used to it, and we don't even really talk about it anymore.
Yeah.
So, you head into an NCAA tournament game, and it's 30-mile-per-hour winds, and it's snowing, and it's raining, and it's crazy. Our guys are like, oh, this is a piece of cake. But to have our own field is nice. I mean, with training, flexibility. It was really nice during COVID when the spring, everybody was competing, everybody was training. You had football, lacrosse, track and field, everybody trying to share the field at the same time. It was really, really nice. And obviously we talk a lot about that in the recruiting process, but for our guys, it's just, let's just focus on what we're here to do. And honestly, it kind of goes back to our comment about being remote and being secluded. We take a lot of pride in the fact that we have everything we need to be successful. We have, incredible resources. We have incredible administration and incredible facilities. It's, I'm pretty blessed to work here.
Yeah, no, I will say, like, again, I'm big into this. It's just sort of noticing the commitment of athletics, and you guys have had an administration that's been committed to athletics across the board for years. Going back to my day, and it's just remarkable that. Hey, we mentioned this a little bit, but you're familiar with those recruiting websites like NCSA and NSC, whatever. They help the kids through the recruiting process. Are you familiar with those? And do you use them at all?
Yeah, it's a good question. We get asked that all the time, honestly. A lot of families ask about them. A lot of recruits discuss them. I'll be quite honest, we don't. I like the personal approach when a recruit or a young man and their family contact us individually. So when it goes through a third party or it goes through another source, we don't spend a lot of time on them, and we probably get close to 25, 30 emails a day from scouts and recruiting services, and sometimes there's very little mention of our university. There's very little mention of what Ohio Northern University is and does for these young men, and so it's how we use our time, and our time is pretty valuable. We are in constant communication with tons and tons of people, and so when we're looking through a lot of these recruiting services, there is no personal touch. There is no, hey, Coach Matejka. There is no, I'm really interested in Ohio Northern. So it's a little bit more difficult to navigate when we want to gauge their interest level. Because sometimes our first question is, okay, what do you want to study? And if the recruit has no idea what Ohio Northern is all about academically, it takes an incredible amount of time to dive into that sort of thing. And so if they put in an ounce of research and an ounce of effort into researching Ohio Northern and our soccer program, they'll quickly find everything that they need to establish a level of interest. So the recruiting services, I don't know if do enough justice there, so we don't spend a lot of time using them, utilizing it. Every once in a while there's a scout that might reach out to us that contacts us individually, and we create a network that way. But it's few and far between. It doesn't happen a whole lot. Yeah. We like the personal touch. We like the personal, we don't like when parents email us. We want the young men to email us. We want the young men to reach out to us and text us and call us and connect with us. And so that's very important because we want to establish that relationship. We want to establish trust from the get-go, a level of communication. And I talked about that being one of our non-negotiables. And if a scout is reaching out to us on their behalf, are we really going down that road? I don't think that. I think it doesn't take a whole lot of time for a young man to put together an email or put together some sort of connection or a phone call or a text message with a coach. It takes very little effort to say, hi, Coach, how are you? So some of those services I don't think are very valuable.
Yeah.
So you mean you don't like the emails that are sent to you, hi, Coach, and then end with go Raiders or go...
I get too many of those that are sent to every coach, every school in the country. So, we get a lot of those for sure.
Hey, I'm assuming you go to showcases. Do you have any thoughts on them? How valuable are those to you in the recruiting process?
Oh, so valuable! Absolutely. They're a phenomenal way for us to, kind of divide and conquer with our staff. We can go to several games a day. We're going to 8 to 10 games each day on a Friday, Saturday, Sunday. They're extremely valuable. It's great for networking. It's great for talking with other coaches and obviously showcasing and identifying some top talent. Showcases are the best way for us to see that talent. I don't know if it's the end-all, be-all, but obviously we spend a lot of time on the road attending these showcases. I mean, there's a big showcase pretty much every weekend, come late winter, early spring, even into the summer a little bit. So, there's just a ton of games to get to. Sometimes we can only go to games for 5 minutes at a time, but it's very vital that we are there, that we attend, that we make sure that the recruits know that we are attending and that we talk to their coaches after the game or we talk to these young men after the game. And again, it goes back to that level of communication and trust that we have with recruits.
I'm assuming you have ID camps. How much value do you place in the ID camps as in that recruiting process?
Oh, absolutely. ID camps are huge. Whether we're attending ID camps that we're invited by other coaches or we host our own, it continues the conversation with our top prospects and guys that we feel like are obviously interested in us and we're interested in them. And but we can also identify some talent that maybe we overlooked or someone that is new to the fold, and we open up the opportunity to have them train with our staff and showcase their talents, showcase their personalities. There's so much learned by those types of connections that I can't always see when I go to a showcase, or I can't always take notice of in a highlight video that they send us. Even a conversation over the phone, there's certain things that we see them interacting with other guys their age and guys that are going to be in their class. And sometimes they, like at our own ID camp, some of our players that work the camp, they interact with them and we see their personalities and we see what they're all about and how they carry themselves, body language. We see some of the intangibles that I'm not always able to witness when I go to a showcase or I see their video that they send us.
Yeah.
Everybody's video is really good, right? They showcase all their top passes and their top defensive plays and their saves. And but when I see them at the ID camp, I see them for who they are. I see their personality. I see them as people. And that's just a very unique way for us to establish the trust that we seek out.
That's funny. That is true. I never thought of it. Every highlight film is extraordinary.
How many mistakes happen there, and how they react to those mistakes, or how they they make a blunder and do they recover? Yeah, I mean everybody has the best shot. Oh my gosh, did you see that shot? Did you see that save? Yeah.
That's awesome. That's funny. Now that makes me think maybe I should, for my son, maybe I should just make a video of his bloopers. This is where he was bad. And he won't go for it, but whatever.
He won't be recruited very
much. Yeah. Hey, this is my son. Look how bad he is. Hey, do you? What are your thoughts on high school soccer? Do you like it? You probably don't get a chance to go see many games just because of the timing of the seasons, but do you have any value in high school?
There is a certain value, I think, in the sense of pride that representing your high school dictates. Talking to MLS Next and a former academy, DA players where they just want to train and play all year round. There's certainly a value in that, but there's also the value in just kind of working hard for your high school and being the hometown hero or being the go-to guy on your team. I think it builds character. So there is a value in that. There are a lot of intangibles and some personality traits that are built upon playing at maybe what most commonly high school soccer is a lower level, just because of how everybody is spread out, and there's a certain percentage of the team that play club all year round, and so high school soccer becomes a secondary thing in the recruiting process. We don't get to go to many games, if any, during the fall. I think the COVID year was really the only time that we were able to take advantage of that and go to high school games. But there is a little bit of value. I would say 99% of our recruiting efforts are done through the club segment or MLS Next or Academy, or ECNL, things like that, National League. So when a recruit brings up high school, we don't typically spend a whole lot of time about it, other than talking about their captaincy or talking about their leadership role and some of the personality traits that we look for and characteristics. I think high school soccer is its own entity, and as I mentioned before, coaching is evolving. There's a lot better coaches out there now. You don't have your typical gym class teacher that's taking over the soccer program that doesn't really know a lot about X's and O's and doesn't have a lot of expertise, but you see that every now and again. But honestly, when we talk to recruits, and even if I bring up high school, they switch gears and they want to talk more about clubs, so we don't spend a whole lot of time discussing it, honestly.
Okay. Hey, last question, and I'll let you get on with your day. What are you telling somebody who's interested in Ohio Northern, coming from high school / club soccer? What are you telling them are the things that they have to learn very quickly to find success at Ohio Northern from a soccer perspective?
Sure. Yeah, I think it's always going to go back to. We always begin our conversations with academics. So you mentioned from a soccer perspective, but I think it's what goes hand in hand is that they're going to be in a really, really unique environment here at Ohio Northern. They're going to be surrounded by really intelligent students and student athletes that are pursuing professional degrees, and so I think it's adapting to that lifestyle first and foremost, where they're not necessarily going to be a big fish in a small pond. They're going to be surrounded by people just like them that all want the same thing, and they all want they all want to be successful on the field. They all want to be successful in life, and so I think it's just adapting to that environment is what we kind of paint that picture for them from day one. That goes hand in hand with lifestyle on the field. They're going to be surrounded by people that were the best club team player. They were the best player on their high school team, or they were the best player on their academy team. And so they're going to be surrounded by other people that are elite, that also want to play, that also want to start. So I think it's just establishing that expectation level where they kind of come in and they're going to challenge for time, they're going to compete for time, but they can't have the expectation level that they're just going to come in and play right away. And I think it's going back to some of that myth busting of we're a Division III school, but we carry ourselves much like a Division I or higher level team, and the fact that our environment is just that much different. We're very competitive. Everybody is very competitive. Everybody wants to win. Everybody hates to lose. And so the more that our incoming students understand that, we always paint the picture of you're going to be pushed in the classroom, you're going to be pushed on the field. And that's one of the reasons why we maintain a certain level of success, is because they grow into that environment. They're led by their upperclassmen and their peers, and they all want the same thing. So it's more just, can they adapt to the high level? Can they the elite level mentality that it takes to be a student athlete at this level? Takes an awful lot of effort. There's a lot of time management that goes into it. But from a soccer perspective, we want everybody to be technical. We want to utilize their strengths and their soccer IQ. They have to obviously adapt and respect that they're going to be going up against a 21, 22-year-old senior, maybe even older. So athletically, they might be at a disadvantage. But above all, we want technical players. We want to be a possession-based team. We want to win games. We want everybody to fit into the culture. It takes a little bit of time. There is a growing period. There is a learning period. The quicker they can do that, the better. But they have to adjust to the life of a student athlete first and foremost.
So let me ask: do you pay attention? Sorry, that wasn't the last question. I just one. Do you pay attention to someone's soccer IQ?
Oh, for sure. Yeah, that's. I mean, when we go recruiting, and I'm going to a big showcase, or our staff, we're all spread out over a bunch of fields, and we need to get to 10, 15 games a day. It's hard for us to sit down and watch an entire 90-minute game. So a lot of times, we're looking for those intangibles. We're looking for the things that you don't necessarily see with them with the ball at their feet. So soccer, in many ways, is a game of space and timing. It's not always your first touch. It's not always what your technical ability shows. A lot of times it's what you do without the ball. It's what you do in and around the spaces before you get the ball, or to open up space for somebody else, or to give more time to your teammates. Those are moments where soccer IQ shines. That's where, when we bring up opportunities in film study, even if it's upon ourselves, we're looking at film on us. We want to tap into their soccer IQ, and we can bring up occasions where we aren't necessarily watching the ball. It's hard for me sometimes to watch a professional game on TV because the camera is always focused on the ball. It's always focused on how incredibly technical these high-level players are. But me as a coach, I'm like, no, pan out. I want to scan to the rest of the field, because that's where you see soccer IQ. That's where you see the intangibles that really make the difference at this level. Everybody's technical here. Everybody's technical at Division III. Everybody wants to win. Everybody is competitive. So it comes down to those finer details and how well your soccer IQ allows you to have more time on the ball and allows you to create more time for others and create space and create good opportunities to score and shut teams down, and vice versa. So yeah, I mean, soccer IQ is very important, but a lot of times it's, when I go recruiting, I'm not always watching the ball. I'm not always watching the player make that pass or the goalkeeper to make that save. It's how well are they carving out time for themselves or for others? How well are they seeing things play out well before they get the ball? And if they can do those things on a repeated basis in a 5-minute segment of time, if I'm going there to see them play, boom, I write them down, I circle their name, and we open up the conversation. But we can always work on technical ability, we can always work on athleticism, but if somebody possesses unique vision and a uniqueness for opening up space and creating opportunities for others, that's huge. That's huge at this level.
So I hate to say this and I hate to admit it. So that last question there on soccer IQ is going to make me buy an Ohio Northern baseball hat. I just hope you're aware of that. What that's going to do to me now is, anyhow. Hey,
That was fantastic. I really do appreciate that. The soccer IQ thing, I think, is often overlooked, and I think there's a lot more value on the big, fast, strong, right? And especially at the club level. And I get it. Not that I don't get it, but I've always been the guy. Like, you give me 11 players that have very high soccer IQ, I'll take those any day of the week over the guys who are big, fast, strong.
Absolutely.
Not to say that those things aren't important as well, but I'll take a 5'2" kid who can move the ball and knows where to go with it over a 6'3" lumbering dude who just wrecks people. Anyhow, Coach, really do appreciate you taking the time. Really do. I'm thankful that we were able to connect, and this was fantastic. Again, newfound respect for Ohio Northern, I'm definitely going to be tracking your guys the start of your season, because that is one heck of a schedule, and I'm looking forward to it.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me. It was great talking with you. Great chatting, answering the questions. This was a fantastic opportunity, and yeah, go Bears. You need some orange and black in your office there.
Well, I have some association with Princeton University, so I do have orange and black, but
right.
not
that
guy.
Mail you a hat. I will. I can mail you a hat. Just send me your address.
Thank you very much, Coach. Really do appreciate it.
Yeah. Thanks for having me.